like to introduce you.
Thank
as
you. Thank you, Vesna. It's wonderful. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here with Vesna and Felix, but also with Lynn, who has contributed to this series, for example, by filming and in many other ways. And I would like to mention Kitty from the Abram Institute, without whom this would have not happened. We recognize that Ghana people are the landowners and custodians of the Adelaide Plains. As you know, Tandanya is a portmanteau blending of Tanda, or Tanda, which means male-red kangaroo, and Ganya, which means rock. So Tanda plus Ganya together, Tandanya. A little bit like Labrador and Poodle, Labradoodle. So you have the same phenomenon as cronut and croissant and donut. You have the same phenomenon in Ghana. So this is why we say Tandanya. Tandanya is actually Tandaganya together, Tandanya. I would like to start with a caveat, and the caveat is a professorial way of saying to cover one's ass. The caveat, it's about the rabbi who phones God from Jerusalem. It's a local call, as you know. And God says, I'm too busy, phone later. The rabbi says, no, I have two very important questions to ask you. God says, shoot. The rabbi, will my daughter ever marry? God says, yes, but not in your lifetime. The rabbi is a little bit disappointed, but at least she will get married, which is very important for a rabbi, that his daughters get married. What's your second question, asks God the rabbi. The rabbi says, God, will the Israeli-Palestinian conflict ever end? God says, yes, but not in my lifetime. Now, why do I say that? Because this series is about peace building. We had many discussions how to call this series before the series actually happened. And there was one proposal to call it the 21st century, the century of peace. And I was very much against it because I thought it was kind of a little bit condescending towards so many victims that we have in the world. And, you know, I wouldn't describe myself as a pessimist, but I don't think that the 21st century is the century of peace. I would like to start with 4 introductory quotations. And these 4 introductory quotations sum up my lecture today, which is kind of a specific lecture within this peace-building colloquium. The first quotation is from Edward Sapir, the famous linguist. Language is a guide to social reality. This is the general field. The second quotation, and I would like to read it together with you, is a little bit more technical, but it has to do very much with what I'm talking about today, and this is othering, or defining oneself vis-a-vis the other, which is, by the way, how we have our identity. Most of us define ourselves because there are other people. This is our definition, vis-a-vis the other. And please forgive the French here. The apparent identity of what appear to be cultural units, human beings, words, meanings, ideas, philosophical systems, social organizations, are maintained only through constitutive repression, an active process of exclusion, opposition, and hierarchization. A phenomenon maintains its identity in semiotic systems only if other units are represented as foreign or other. We usually write other with a capital O. Through a hierarchical dualism in which the first is privileged or favored, while the other is deprivileged or devalued in some way. This is Cahoon 2003. I think it's very important to acknowledge this idea and maybe to acknowledge this reality. The third quotation is in Spanish. We have Lynn Arnold, my friend here, who has written his linguistic PhD on Asturian, which is a language in Spain. El original es infiel a la traducción, and this is from Borges. the original is unfaithful to the translation. And I find myself in my life in so many situations in which I say to myself, el original es infiel a la traducción. The original is unfaithful to the translation. I think it's very, very powerful. If you think about it, you'll see more and more instances in your own life in which this is true. And I'm not referring to the story about the South Dakotan who was asked, he was a librarian in South Dakota, and he was asked whether they had the New Testament in Greek, to which he replied, have they translated it into Greek? I'm not referring to that. And the fourth quotation is just a Latin dictum or Latin saying, which is very much in line with what I sometimes do in my articles, and this is to fractalize or to hologrammatize, maximus in minimis. In other words, I look at one word, small word, in one small language, and I can draw conclusions about the entire social, cultural, identity, religious, othering reality of this society, of this culture. So maximus in minimis. You can learn a lot from the very small detail. I think in some religions they say that God is in the details, right? So these were the four quotations that are at the heart. I would like to introduce you to etymythological nativization. And I'm sorry that I introduced you to phenomena that you might have not heard about. Etymythological means folk etymological. It means when I hear something and I do not really know what it is, I try to get it into my system. For example, if I'm an Arabic speaker, and is there an Arabic speaker here? No Arabic speaker? If I'm an Arabic speaker and I hear the word influenza, which is the flu, I immediately think, because I don't know what Latin influenza, no, I don't know Latin, so I immediately think of anfluenza. Anfluenza in Arabic means the nose of the goat. The nose of the goat is always a little bit wet, as if it suffers from the flu, from influenza. This is etymythology, it's folk etymology, it's etymology, and which is a derivation of the origin of words, finding the origin of words, and mythology together. Of course, influenza does not come from influenza. Of course, influenza comes from Latin, the word for influence, you know, your influence under the weather. I guess there are many flus around now. But the point is that the etymythology works because I'm trying to take this foreign knowledge, foreign word, and put it into my own system, into my pre-existent words in my brain, in this case Arabic. Etymythological nativization, in which a foreign lexical item is matched with a phonetically, meaning sound, and semantically, meaning meaning, similar pre-existent native word or root is what I call phonosemantic matching. I'll redefine it. Phonosemantic matching, which means sound meaning matching, is a multi-sourced neologism, so a new word that comes from several sources at the same time, that preserves both the meaning and the approximate sound of the parallel expression in the source language. The source language is the language from where the word comes. For example, tsunami comes to English from what language? The word tsunami. From Japanese, right. Using pre-existent target language words or roots. So it's very, very important that you remember that it's pre-existent. So I'm trying to hear influenza. Oh, influenza. Anf is pre-existent in Arabic, nose, and anza is pre-existent in Arabic, goat. Influenza, nose of the goat. So it's very important that we have the pre-existent because this is part of my own system. At the beginning of the 20th century, Israel had thousands of doctors arriving, thousands of hypochondriacs arriving, but there was no language to discuss the medical problems of the hypochondriacs with doctors. So what do you do with a word like rachit in Russian, rachit, or rickets in English, or rachitis in German? you create a phono-semantic matching, which is a folk etymological nativization within Israeli, using Hebrew rach, which means soft, because rickets is a disease in which your bones are softened. I think Mozart might have suffered from lack of vitamin D, resulting in rachitis, or rachit in Russian, or rickets. I don't know if you've heard of this disease. It's not that common in Australia today, I hope. Rachit in Israeli is a phono-semantic matching because you use a pre-existent word which means rach in Hebrew, which means soft. But actually the result resembles the sound and of course the meaning of the internationalism rachitis in Latin, rachitis in German, and rachit in Russian. Is there any Russian speaker here? Russian speaker. Rachit. This is Jerusalem, by the way. The same happens with the word gay. American gay is phono-semantically matched with a politically correct folk etymology, which is gay. Gay means proud in the Bible. In Isaiah, if you open Isaiah, gay means proud. Nothing to do with homosexuality. But because gay in American has to do also with a proud homosexual community, then, and also because of political correctness, we get rid of Aliz. Aliz was the calque for gay, merry, cheerful. Aliz used to mean happy, then it used to mean homosexual, but then it became politically incorrect. So we have killed the word Aliz. We cannot use the word Aliz in Israeli anymore, because if you say I'm Aliz as in I'm happy, it sounds like you're homosexual, but if you say I'm Aliz as I'm homosexual, it is politically incorrect, like he's Aliz. Oh. So we have killed the word actually. This is something that happens a lot in Aboriginal languages. In Aboriginal languages, when somebody dies, say his name was Bill, you go to the restaurant and say, I would like to get the, I cannot say his name because it's a taboo. So then I say, I would like to get the check, please. And this is how Aboriginal languages evolve, because you're not supposed to say the word that sounds like the one who died, right? This is called taboo. The same with Aliz, but because of that we have Geh. Now what is interesting is that Shvua Gava, this is the Pride Week. Gava means both pride in biblical Hebrew, but as well as homosexuality. So we don't need to say the Pride Gay Parade. Just the Pride Parade means the gay parade, both gay and pride. The same with American gender. American means American English. Israeli migdar. Migdar is a phono-semantic matching of gender, geder. It's the same as gender or gender, it doesn't matter. The G and the J do not matter in Israeli here. And then gader means define. So migdar is a definition between male and female. But the geder is there because of gender or gender. So this is a phono-semantic matching. You use a pre-existent component in order to imitate the sound and the meaning of a foreign word, in this case from American. I have heard an Israeli feminist protesting against this neologism, claiming that it is politically incorrect, as it derives from gader, fence. You know, there is a gader between the Palestinians and the Israelis, gader, fence. As if there is a barrier, a mechitza, between boys and girls, just like in an Orthodox synagogue. In an Orthodox synagogue, if you go to synagogue place here, off Randall Street. On the left there is Apple, I think. It used to be an Orthodox synagogue, now it is a nightclub probably. And if you enter, you see that the girls are upstairs and the boys are downstairs. I don't know what they do upstairs these days, but you can have a look at this Orthodox synagogue. I believe that the neologizers of Migdal, gender, thought of lehagdir, define, rather than of gader, fence, but this of course does not change the negative connotations that a speaker might infer. After all, etymology, the origin of word, is often forgotten. As you know, on 15 January 1999, David Howard, a white aide to Washington, D.C. Mayor Anthony Williams, who happens to be black, used the word niggardly, which means ungenerous, stingy, in a conversation with two colleagues. 11 days later, he resigned as rumors were spreading that he had used a racial slur. Speakers linked niggardly to the politically incorrect nigger and nigra, contemptuous terms for a black person. However, initially niggardly had nothing to do with nigger. But this does not matter anymore, because in fact, the etymythology, the folk etymology, becomes more important. The perception by the native speaker becomes more important than the actual etymology, which is the diachronic one, the real historical one. So even if I tell you that niggardly has nothing to do with nigger, it doesn't matter. I cannot use the word niggardly in America because it is politically incorrect. And on the other hand, how many Bulgarians do you know who protest against the sodomite meaning of the word bugger in English? Bugger originally denoted Bulgarian, French bouc, from bulk, from Bulgarus, referring to a sect of heretics who came from Bulgaria to France in the 11th century. How many English speakers know that when they say poor bugger, which in this case has no sodomite meaning, just oh shit, you know, poor bugger. How many people know that it means Bulgarian? Oh, Bulgarian. Not too many. And I've never heard of somebody who complained to the Queen about it. Etymythology is often more powerful than real etymology. The story goes that Osama bin Laden died and went to heaven. He was greeted by George Washington, who slapped him and yelled, "How dare you try to destroy the nation I helped conceive?" Patrick Henry then approached and punched Osama in the nose. After that, James Madison entered and kicked him in the shin. He was followed by an angry Thomas Jefferson, who whacked Osama over the head with a cane. And then came many other early Americans and punched Osama in the face. Did I say Obama? Osama. Osama goes to God and says, "I don't understand. This is not what you promised me." God says, did I tell you that I promised 72 Virginians waiting for you in heaven? This amusing anecdote brings to mind a recent case of a scholarly reanalysis of the Quranic virgins promised to Muslim martyrs. Luxembourg 2000 suggests that Horain, which in Arabic is pronounced Horain with an expectoration. If you expectorate as an Arab, you know that you need to learn to expectorate. So Horain, not Hor, but Hor. Luxembourg suggests that Horain promised to the faithful in surahs 44, 54, and 52:20 of the Quran, the Muslim Bible, are not 72 dark, wide-eyed maidens, as most commonly believed. I mean, if you ask most people, they will say, yeah, 72 virgins are waiting. But rather, 72 white grapes, jewels of crystals. In other words, Muslim martyrs will not get virgins but sultanas. Sultanas are white raisins. Now, you might say, why bother, why sultana? Because sultanas actually are extremely rare in the desert. Sultanas are extremely rare in the Middle East. It's not something to be kind of neglected or underestimated. Note that in Syriac, the word hor, a feminine plural adjective meaning white, is associated with raisin. Now, if this alternative interpretation is true, if this is etymology rather than folk etymology, Luxembourg is not a folk etymologizer, he's a scholar, but some scholars might get it wrongly. Or rather, if one can convince extremist Muslims that it is true, it has a potential to change the course of history. Well, at least in cases such as the Palestinian teenager caught in Israel with his penis wrapped with delicate white cloth just before attempting a suicide bombing. When asked about it, he said that his mother had told him that when he arrives in paradise, he would get 72 virgins and his penis needed to be ready. This is a true story. You can find it in the news. So we get into othering. Now that we know the basics, which means phonosemantic matching as a phenomenon, I would like to discuss rejective phonosemantic matching. I would like to discuss politically incorrect PSM. Not like gay, which was politically correct, homosexual and proud together, but rather PSMs that are employed for demonization. And I would like to ask, eventually, whether this is actually good for peace building or bad for peace building. Politically incorrect PSM is a subversive PSM produced by members of one religion or national group, for example, Jews,